What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Track Car Obsession. What we're going to do now that we have the interior out, we're going to get started on the drivetrain. I've got someone that's interested in picking up the engine, so instead of taking dry ice and tearing up the sound deadening material that was underneath the carpet, we're going to go ahead and start pulling the whole engine, transmission, and everything out so that can get sold, and then we'll get started taking the sound deadening out probably later this weekend in another episode. Stay tuned. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove this hood. We just need it out of the way. It'll get better lighting for the camera onto the engine. It'll also give us more space to just pull everything out, and when we get the engine hoist in here, to go ahead and get the engine out of the way without having this in our way. All right, so now that that's off, we're just going to start taking off different pieces that are going to get in the way of us taking this engine out. So we're going to do the air box, and then we'll take the battery out. All right, so I removed a couple computers here. I know one of them is the engine ECU, and then the other I'm not really sure about. I'll have to check the part number and see what it is. I'm just trying to get this all out of the way. It's not 100% necessary in order to do an engine swap. It is a little bit in the way, and if we're going to be swinging around a bigger motor, I just want to make sure that we have all the room in here that we can. I'm also going to probably clean up the engine bay a little bit, so the more that I can strip out of it, the better. And I'm going to need to chase a lot of things in the wiring harness. So as you can see, now that the air box is gone and the battery's out, still got to pull the battery box and the overflow container, and then we've got a fuse box over here, I believe. As soon as all this stuff is out, you can really see how small this rotary motor is. I mean, it literally goes to right there, so you're talking maybe 2 feet long. So it's pretty incredible. I know it doesn't have a lot of torque, but it does have a lot of horsepower for such a small compact engine. But because there's iron in there, and there's still a cast aluminum manifold for the intake on the lower intake, and then you've got cast iron header. The aluminum V6 that's going to be going in here weighs maybe 20 pounds more from what I understand. So pretty incredible. But anyway, we're going to get back to it. I'm going to remove secondary air pump, which I believe this is, strut tower bar, washer tank, and then start removing some of these engine pieces just to open up the area more to make it easier to hook the engine hoist to it and go ahead and pull it out. Okay, so the battery died on my camera right as I was pulling this off, but it's clearly a lot easier to just pull the top of the battery tray off so that you can get to the remaining bolts than trying to remove the coolant overflow, which I thought would be easier, but I couldn't move it with the top of the battery tray in the way, which is probably why they have it in 2 pieces. So take off the top piece, and then you can get to the bottom bolts easier. All right, so the next step, at least for me, is going to start disassembling the front of the motor and the top of the motor. It'll just be easier to get to the hoist attachment here on the front of the motor, and then we're going to remove the belts. And then before I can remove the coolant system or anything like that, I'm going to have to drain the radiator as well as drain the block. There's a plug on the side of the block where you can drain the coolant from the block itself. I'll show you where that is when I do it. And then and drain the oil. Right now I'm running out of light, So I'm going to go ahead and take this alternator off and throttle body and probably the upper intake manifold, and then maybe the washer bottle here. It looks like it may just be water. If it's not water, it's definitely not water. So I'll have to put that in a container as well, because I don't want that running into my yard. So let me go ahead and get started on this. All right, technically you should drain your coolant before you do this. I believe this is a intake warmer. It's your coolant runs through your throttle body, I think, to help your engine get to temperature earlier, or to help with efficiency or something. But so there probably is going to be coolant through here, and it may spill a bit. So if you're trying not to make a mess, make sure you drain the engine coolant before you take the throttle body off. All right, so what I'm doing now is loosening the alternator so I can get the belt off and then pull the whole alternator off. In order to do that, loosen the bottom mount and then loosen the tensioner lock, and then go ahead and loosen the tensioner itself. And then that should give you enough play to take the belt off. All right, then you can remove the bottom alternator mount. Then we're going to remove the other mounts over here, the 2 bolts or nuts, and then take off all the connectors on the top, and the alternator should pop off. Okay, in order to get to these 2 lower nuts, at least with a socket, you got to take the water pump pulley off. So it's probably easier to go ahead and do that while you still have the belt on. That way you can break them loose without having to do the sideways screwdriver trick like I just had to do. Yours may come off with an open-end wrench, but mine started to strip the nut. So I decided to go ahead and take the pulley off so I can get a whole socket on here. All right, so now that we have the bracket off, we should be able to wiggle the alternator free. There it is. All right, so that gives us easy access to this front one. So now what we're gonna do is take off the upper intake manifold so that we can get to the back mount easier. If we've got to take off any more than that, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, change of plans. Since I don't need the wipers or anything like that, once the car is completed, I'm gonna go ahead and take these off, and I'm gonna see how much of this area up against the firewall we can open up to get down to these bolts easier. All right, well, after getting this piece off, it's clear that there's no way to access the back of the engine from up here. Sometimes they have panels you can take out that are in the way. So we'll just have to reach around the manifold here and get these last 2 bolts out of the top to be able to pull that off, and that should give us more access there. This needed to come off anyway because we're gonna be removing the windshield wiper motor as well as the arms and everything. So this needed to come off, and we got to replace the cracked windshield. So back to the intake manifold. Okay. So I found one other bolt under here, and there's probably something else holding it in. So I'm gonna have to check online just to see the easiest way to pull that off before wasting any more time on it. I took all the coil packs off, unplugged the wires to get those out of the way. So now we have easy access to this hook. Tomorrow what we're gonna do is drain the oil, drain the coolant, and continue taking this off. If we can get that done quick enough, we'll be able to go ahead and pull the motor tomorrow. Got to take the drive shaft off, the shifter off, and then like grounding cables and anything else that's still loosely attached to it. And we should have this thing out pretty quick. Anyway, I'm out of light, but thanks for watching. We're gonna pick up where we left off tomorrow. See you later.